Hello, I'm Charlie Brooker and you're watching Newswipe, a programme all about what's been going on. Things like this.
Afghanistan, huge surge in low-quality footage. Torture allegations, just how bad is the seating in economy these days? And victory for equality as BNP votes to admit wankers of any colour.
But we start by going live to South London, where I'm expected to be speaking in a few moments. We can see the sofa there. Not much happening at present, but that's all expected to change. Me is currently positioned outside. Me, what's the latest on this? Well, Me, there really are no new facts to report as such. I'm outside the building where I'm expected to return any moment now. When that happens, I should be making my way in through that door, taking a position on the sofa and reading a short statement to camera. It's believed I left these premises sometime earlier today to visit a local shop, stock up on some semi-skimmed milk, 1 or 2 cans of a well-known Diet Cola and a chocolate bar. No word on precisely what bar we're talking about, but clearly we're dealing with some kind of sweet tooth here. And I understand, I think I can hear Me returning. Yes, here I am approaching the door, as you can see, opening it. Having a bit of trouble there. Stepping inside. And that's me now inside the building. We'll just pass over again live to the live. No, I seem to be heading off for a piss. Me, is there anything you can tell me about the sofa we're seeing now? Well, the sofa, I mean, it's quite familiar to some of your viewers. It's got a kind of burgundy hue. It's understood it actually came with the flat, which was fully furnished when that was purchased. We'll have to cut you off there, I'm afraid. Me appears to have come back, and so let's... I don't know about you, but the news' obsession with live broadcasting gets right on my boober jugs.
Bloody Progress is to blame. It's made it possible for the news to broadcast live from anywhere in the world, usually for no good reason.
David Cameron is going to make a speech in this academy in South London.
Sometimes it excitedly cuts live to a location where someone's about to make a statement, albeit not quite yet. Sometimes it shows you eerie, unpopulated chambers or rooms full of people ambiently milling around, which make you start to feel like a ghost if you stare for too long. Sometimes it cuts from one load of boring live nothing to another load of boring live nothing, just to keep you up to date with all the boring live nothing in the world. Sometimes it goes into vulture mode, cutting live in the hope of spotting something awful happening, like a collapsing bridge.
It's not obvious, of course, looking at it, but it is in a very dangerous state and could collapse at any time, although having said that, we've been saying that for a while.
And when it comes to rubbernecking, sometimes the news just doesn't know when to stop. For instance, last week, Sky's obsession with on-the-spot tragedy saw it broadcasting live footage of Alexander McQueen's body being taken into a waiting ambulance, images we've chosen to censor.
We just want to pause for a moment as we look at the pictures of Alexander McQueen's body being removed from his flat. We'll pause for a moment.
Having thus shown due respect for the dead, they then hovered over his body like a vulture as it was driven through the street, because, you know, it was important to keep their viewers informed. When an actual reporter bothers to show up, they're often standing somewhere which shut up shop hours ago, or they're too far from a computer to be much use.
Everybody, of course, pouring through this report right now. We are able to do that and you're not. So let me just give you some headlines that we're getting.
Often they patronise you by standing near something vaguely linked to the story, which is why a correspondent doing the Toyota report has to lurk outside a garage with the logo in the background in the middle of the night.
But apart from making their job harder, it also makes them just look like losers.
Look at these transient outsider nomads literally conducting meaningless lives. There's just no dignity to it. It turns being a journalist into the physical equivalent of standing on a busy high street advertising a golf sale. I mean, why in dog's dick should we trust the analysis of someone who doesn't have the wherewithal to head indoors when it rains?
Sometimes I wouldn't be surprised if they suddenly cut to someone standing in outer Mongolia.
And we can now go live to Peter there in Mongolia. Peter, have you felt cold like this before?
Worst of all, when rubbish weather itself becomes the story, reporters feel some psychotic urge to remain standing outside, broadcasting their dramatic images way beyond the point where any sane person would get the flipping sherbet out of there.
Michelle,
We're gonna go to a break and let you try to maybe walk a little bit closer to the camera.
And quite apart from any of those issues, can you imagine the carbon footprint this leaves behind? Consider the fuel burnt getting there, the lighting, the hot air pumped into the atmosphere by their stupid mouths. Sometimes I think the news might be single-handedly trying to bring about an environmental catastrophe, which it will then report on. Mind you, on the bright side, if the sea levels do rise, at least there'll be fewer patches of land for them to stand around on blabbing down the lens. And now we head back live to the studio.
Well, now it's time for our new Have Your Say section, in which you don't have your say. Instead, embittered comic Doug Stanhope does.
I'm Doug Stanhope, and that's why I drink. Hey, what's your opinion about the news of the day? You think no one cares? They actually don't. But every day on CNN, Jack Cafferty pretends to care about what you think. Jack Cafferty is an ex-alcoholic windbag on CNN. He's like a defeated, low-rent Howard Beale that comes on every day with very strong, surly opinions about whatever the subject of the day is.
Well, why don't they renegotiate these damn trade agreements that sent all these jobs to places like India and China and Mexico? Why don't they start there?
But his opinion isn't quite enough. He wants your opinion as well. Please log on to CNN.com and tell Jack how you feel about this.
Let's give those folks in Washington the benefit of our collective wisdom.
Because they want you to believe that your opinion matters. Makes you feel good. Yeah, I'm going to tell them what I think.
Ralph writes from Yakima, Washington.
And Jack will read the emails at the end of the show. They're always very, very insightful. Hey, Jack. I got a question. If we're gonna bail out all these Washington fat cats, where's my bailout? They give you opinion polls about subjects you couldn't possibly have any basis to make an opinion. What's the likelihood of another terrorist attack now that Obama's in office? They'll put up big pie charts that say, 67% say it's very likely, and 30% say it's highly unlikely. 3% don't know. The big pie charts with 3% don't know. No, you all don't fucking know. That should be a giant pizza pie of I have no earthly idea. What that shows you is 97% of Americans will give you a strong opinion even though they have no fucking clue whatsoever about the subject. Everyone is so desperate to not only have an opinion, but make that opinion heard and think that opinion counts. You Twitter and you MySpace and you Facebook your stupid opinions and you spout off to your coworker. You know what I think? I think it's the liberals that are ruining everything. And that's not enough. So you go to town hall meetings and you yell and scream and they bang the gavel trying to get you to shut up. And that's still not enough, so you go home and then you write blogs in the middle of the night because you haven't had your opinion heard enough. You probably blog about this segment. Doug Stanhope ruined Newswipe. Why is that fat-headed alcoholic on this show? Get rid of him. And you know what? There's a good chance I might stumble across that blog one day when I'm sitting alone in some hotel room and I'm in the middle of the night and I'm drinking vodka and yogurt because I drank all the mixers out of the mini bar and the yogurt's all I have left from breakfast when I thought I could eat solid food, but I was wrong. And I'm gonna find the blog where you say I suck and it'll hurt my feelings. So let me circumvent your blog before you even write it by answering in kind, go fuck yourself. I don't care what your opinion is. Jack Cafferty pretends to care. Go log on to his stupid show.
I hate sport. If you ask me, sport belongs in a news bulletin about as much as a mummified cat's head belongs in a Caesar salad. So imagine my confused horror when quite recently a sports story without any sport in it made it into the news. The saga began when England captain John Terry, this bloke apparently, allegedly cheated on his wife with a lingerie model who used to go out with one of his teammates. The News of the World were about to print these allegations when Terry's lawyers took out a super injunction. Super injunctions are interesting legal weapons really. They don't just gag the press, they gag them from mentioning the existence of the gag. In other words, you know how people used to say, I could tell you but then I'd have to kill you? Well, these days they just kill you. Anyway, a judge lifted the super gag, much to the delight of the triumphant News of the World lawyer with a logo stuck to his head, who turned up all over the shop to cry about what a victory for free speech this was.
Too often in these cases, the public's right to know is ignored in preference to the so-called protection of incredibly wealthy and pampered footballers and other celebrities.
Yeah, you know, they hate the wealthy and pampered at News International because they're owned by one of the poorest and least indulged billionaires on the planet. Now everyone was free to gab about it, the story got more traction than it deserved, making the leap to Stern TV news bulletins in the process.
Will Terry's secret affect his England captaincy? A gagging order is lifted about his private life.
But the question of whether Terry would remain captain wasn't going to be answered for a week. He wasn't talking, his wife was away, his teammates were making no comment, the model was weighing up her options, and the England manager was overseas recovering from a knee op. Nothing was happening. So in order to justify its presence in the bulletin, the news had to play keepy-uppy with the story. One way to keep the ball in the air is to repeatedly report on the fact that you're repeatedly reporting on it. That way you can refer to mounting pressure.
Pressure is mounting on the England captain John Terry.
Pressure on John Terry didn't show on the pitch.
There's no let-up in the pressure on John Terry this morning.
Or you can say there are growing calls for him to resign.
There have been growing calls for him to resign.
There are growing calls for John Terry to be sacked.
The England captain faces growing calls to quit.
Combine the mounting pressure with the growing calls and you've got yourself a media whirlwind, which you can also refer to.
There is no easing of the media whirlwind swirling around John Terry today.
To ensure the pressure kept up, the reporters got their stalking gear on and headed out to stand around entertainingly looking for Terry.
Any sign of John Terry there today?
Yes, in the past half hour I've just seen John Terry.
Yes, there he was, through the trees, and as the cameras peered at him through the branches like a serial killer, it was easy to see where all this pressure we'd heard about was coming from. Because by now his every move was under surveillance, and wherever Terry went he walked headlong into a storm.
Stepping off the team bus and into a media storm. Stepping onto the pitch and into a storm of controversy.
With its quarry thus encircled by a zillion watchful eyes, the news waited for something to give. Meanwhile, the tabloids were busy smearing their pages with all the shit they could find. A stealthy PR war had broken out, which meant scintillating sawaway snaps of Tony Terry strategically appeared alongside aspersions about Vanessa Perencel's morals on one side, while Max Clifford paraded his latest catch on the other, in scenes which closely resembled an age-gap romantic subplot from a rubbish soap opera he was directing. Of course, in any soap, you sometimes have to do more than one take, which Max thoughtfully allowed ITN to do in this revealing clip.
Hold on, you don't have to break your neck something. If you want to go back, we'll start again from here if you want.
And while Max got all Albert Square on us, we were treated to plenty of displays of expert dribbling. We heard sexy football experts dribbling about how it would affect morale.
What will be the impact in the dressing room?
Bearded talk show ballbags dribbling about it in radio studios.
What he does in his private life is nobody's business whatsoever.
It is!
Erudite broadsheet pundits dribbling about it on Newsnight.
He's a kind of snorting priapic bull. That's who you want, leading the men into battle.
And silly callers to the right stuff dribbling about whether they'd rather marry Terry or Tiger Woods.
Helen on line 2.
Helen, good morning.
Good morning.
Tiger or Terry?
I'd go for a tiger.
But perhaps the finest displays of dribbling of all were performed by extreme self-caricature wag Lizzie Cundy, who was suddenly omnipresent.
As a wag, Lizzie Cundy knows how tough life can be in the spotlight.
She spilled her brains on the 5 News sofa.
No one knows more than John Terry today how foolish he's been.
Yeah, and the real tragedy is he's also too foolish to appreciate what insight his own foolishness gives him. She appeared on family-friendly GMTV to hear Ben Shepherd say players shouldn't let an erection cloud their judgment.
Even if these girls are throwing themselves at the footballers, no matter how hard it is, they should be able to say no.
She even took part in synchronised dribbling as Sky News brought blokes and birds together for a polarising debate about it all, in which a blokey bloke bloked on about how it broke the sacred credo of bloke.
If you apply bloke rules that, you know, we talk about down the pub, you know, over a beer, people will say he's completely out of order.
Yeah, completely out of order over your pint of tits. Down your bloke pub.
Let's be honest, if John Terry scores the winning girl in the World Cup, you know, people are going to forget about this.
Yes, of course, if Terry scores the winning girl in the World Cup, people will indeed forget about this, but should he be playing as captain? In The Sun, Ian Wright suggested the players should hold a ballot, a scenario illustrated with a startlingly realistic image of Wayne Rooney at the ballot box, casting what was either a very vague vote or possibly his signature. Meanwhile, according to every sanctimonious titamaboob in Pressville, John Terry should definitely go, although most punters quizzed by Sky didn't seem quite as judgmental as the journalists.
It's off the pitch, we shouldn't really care what happens off the pitch.
It's his personal life and he should be allowed to deal with that himself without it being in the papers, the press, everywhere you look.
He's done nothing wrong that thousands of people in this country haven't done since time immemorial, especially people like MPs, people at the higher end of the strata. So
there's a man who's never seen the Jeremy Kyle show.
Although some of their viewers, presumably sickened by the sight of Terry looming large and peering over the host's shoulder, seemed less than impressed with the whole of football.
Emails coming in saying, what's the matter with these footballers? They can't string a sentence together, and yet they say that they have.
Still, the question of whether Terry should be captain or not was about to be answered as Fabio Capello returned to act as a pressure magnet.
All the pressure now on Fabio Capello.
In fact, the pressure was now on both of them and the coverage reached fever pitch. Capello was bothered at the airport.
No comments, please.
Excuse me, guys.
When are you expecting to meet him?
No comments, please. I just arrived. Wait.
He was followed to his car. He was shown limping into his flat.
Lives in a top floor flat. It's quite a climb, isn't it, when you've just had an operation on your knee?
The next morning he was helpfully shown limping out of his flat. Sky's vulture cam took to the skies so we could look down on John Terry slightly more than we already did, and other cameras showed him leaving the Chelsea grounds on his way to Wembley in his car. As Capello waited at Wembley, the news desperately zoomed in on any vehicle which looked like it might be driven by an adulterer, and then the meeting itself took place and the inevitable occurred.
John Terry has been sacked as England captain after a week of damaging allegations about his personal life.
Yes, Terry got the chop. All that pressure had paid off. The one good bit of news for John Terry was that for whatever reason, Vanessa wasn't going to sell her story, an announcement she made via Max Clifford, who now appeared to be directing a soap scene about his own private life.
Yeah, you're up to speed.
Yeah, straight down the bar.
Talking at this level, okay. I haven't spoken to anybody about my private life. They have spoken to everybody about my private life.
Anyway, if a super injunction makes a story disappear because the news can't talk about it, the whole Terry affair was the polar opposite, a lurid story that largely exists because the news is talking about it. It was an unedifying tussle over the sexual morality of a man who kicks a ball around on a lawn for a living, which made everyone involved look a bit rubbish, but worst of all, upset one little boy!
Were you upset by the decision?
Proud of yourself, are you? The news? You monster.
Creatures! And it's been a high-profile week for beasties of all stripes as Sky broadcast a stomach-churning report on the growing trade for leeches. It seems the medieval bloodsuckers have garnered newfound popularity after being touted on gaudy chat shows by celebrity idiots.
It crawls in, and you feel it bite down on you.
Actually, I think she's describing sex with Ashton Kutcher.
And then you just watch it swell up and get fatter and fatter.
Well, that's what happens in a relationship.
That glitzy Hollywood endorsement was good news for the owners of this horrible Russian leech farm.
The female-dominated workforce makes for a maternal atmosphere.
There is always contact and a special relationship between humans and leeches. Women have a maternal instinct, so they are better at doing this delicate and complicated work than men.
Hope they don't breastfeed them.
Having depicted the delightful leech rearing process, Sky showed us a great interview with a leech fan.
It always gives me beautiful, healthy skin. The blood flows to my face and makes it younger.
The gory climax of the treatment is cutting the gorged leech in half and covering the face with the resulting blood.
Oh, women.
From leech blood to rat justice, as another informative Sky report dispassionately covers charges of animal cruelty lodged in an Australian court following last year's murder of a rat on I'm a Celebrity.
In case you're wondering how the rat got on, let's take a look at some of its best bits.
Magistrate Mark Buscombe said it was clear that unnecessary pain had been inflicted and that a corporate entity of the size of ITV needed to exercise greater care when having an animal killed for the purpose of causing greater sensationalism and attention for its programme.
I'm sure they'll bear that in mind when they make that show where Ant and Dec kill a dog.
Yes, thank God you won't have to witness anything like this because ITV are taking steps to make sure it never happens again.
This was an oversight and we have since thoroughly reviewed our procedures and are putting in place a comprehensive training programme to ensure that this does not happen in future series.
I'd like to see what that comprehensive training programme looks like. I'm sure it's terribly thorough.
But rats weren't the only animals shown slipping down the human gullet as ITV transmitted a startling report on the culture war between dog lovers and dog eaters in China.
You'd never think of eating your dog then?
No, 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 no.
Yes, apparently modern Chinese folk are coming round to the thought that dogs might be people too.
I used to eat dogs, but when I started caring for them, I got a different feeling. I can't eat them anymore.
I imagine I'll be the same when I have children.
Of course, no report on dog eating would be complete without a grisly money shot of some dog eating.
This is the skiing. It's very good for you. The meat is nutritious and warming in the cold weather.
When I see them in a stew like that, I think dogs are a bit like onions, really. Every time I cut one up, I start crying.
Now here is some verse inspired by recent events, courtesy of our resident poet, Tim Key.
This is a poem about politicians. Dreadful. I'm thinking of the C word. There was a big do arranged for all the MPs to discuss how wretched they were, and to eat humble pie as regards the expenses fiasco. The press were invited and everyone had to drink and mingle and apologise as much as possible. Hoon sidestepped a hack and waddled over to Ed Balls. "Ear, is this wine free?" he asked. Straw poked his beak in. Might not be, because we've all been naughty. "I don't think it is free," Widdicombe squawked, sipping from her hip flask. The waiters served up braised venison and potatoes and fishes in sherry. But increasingly the MPs declined, for fear of actually having to pay, as some gritted their teeth or gnawed at their lips from the hunger. Widdicombe unwrapped her sarnies. The Miliband's winked at her and ate their little yoghurts they'd stowed in their little briefcases. After a couple of speeches admitting they were all wankers, the MPs spilled out into the road. Some confused, abortive hailing of black cabs ensued. There was no guarantee there'd be freebies, you see. Hoon turned to Balls. "Ear, do you know anything about night buses?" Balls tapped his bicycle helmet and pointed at his trouser clips. Hoon nodded, and he huffed. And he set off on foot to his nearest home.
Question: what's got two faces and one giant pair of balls? Answer: the average MP. Huh? Am I right? I think I am. Huh?
Yes, following the expenses stinkfest, many believe the House of Commons contains more con artists than a Hustle box set.
I mean, I haven't seen so many dirty snouts and slimy arseholes crammed into such a small space since I last looked inside a sausage.
Recently, Westminster tried to draw a line under the whole sorry saga by getting Sir Thomas Legg to review the expenses system. His Legg report asked MPs to pay back over £1 million. That's the sort of news that makes everybody laugh.
10 to 3, the headlines. MPs are ordered to repay more than £1 million for expenses. A long-awaited review says the system is deeply flawed.
But worse was to come for the beleaguered political class, because the Crown Prosecution Service announced it was preparing to press charges against some MPs.
Once again, the BBC threw live to the scene of the CPS reception, which their reporter was standing outside, brilliantly positioned so she wouldn't be able to witness the QCDPP of the CPS dropping some MPs in the SH1T. He revealed that 3 Labour MPs and 1 Tory peer were going to be charged.
And just to put noses further out of joint, their lawyers raised the issue of parliamentary privilege, a law so old it was carved into the side of a turnip back in 1689.
The thought of this being used as a legal defence for politicians facing criminal charges made almost every newspaper columnist in the land unbelievably angry.
On the BBC News channel, political commentator Anthony Howard was so flabbergasted he forgot one of his own areas of expertise.
What the 3 MPs are trying to say is that their submission of expenses is a proceeding in Parliament. I think that's stretching things a bit myself, but there we are. I'm not, well, I am actually a lawyer, but...
One of the accused, Jim Devine, cut a lonely figure on Channel 4 News, if you ignored all the reporters thronging around him. He seemed very keen to get his side of the story across in the media. When Sky excitedly threw live to their correspondent for an interview with Mr Devine, they appeared to capture a workman in the background having a crafty piss and a fag.
That's it, just stub it out in the piss and walk away like nothing's happened. Textbook stealth. Bet he's shit hot at Metal Gear Solid.
In an amusing interview with Channel 4 News, Devine seemed to almost outwit Krishnan Guru Murthy by appearing too stupid to argue with.
What you seem to have explained to us is that you put in a false receipt. It was a receipt for one thing which said another, and that's obviously why they've come after you.
No, the false receipt would be if the £5,500 was going in my pocket.
No,
what I'm saying to you,
it's false if it wasn't what you said it was.
This is a bit like watching a semantic tussle between a magistrate and a cloth.
But you can see, I mean, surely that a receipt that says one thing but is actually for another is a false receipt.
Sorry, what receipt?
Surely you can see, if you just take a step back for a second, where the rest of us are looking from, that if you put in a receipt for one thing and it's actually for something else, that is false, and therefore you've broken the law.
That sounds reasonable, but if Krishnan took a step back for a second from his position and looked at this in a cosmic way, he'd see we're all just atoms in a big, meaningless, swirling soup, that none of this matters, and the word law is just a noise made of air. All the main party leaders were keen to be seen to be outraged by the whole thing. Gordon Brown said it was serious.
These are very serious criminal allegations.
David Cameron said it was serious.
These are extremely serious matters.
And Nick Clegg said it was...
whatever Nick Clegg said.
The fact that 3 Labour MPs and only 1 Tory peer were charged was great news for the humanoid David Cameron, who promptly stood in front of the cast of Skins delivering a speech in which he repeatedly promised to fix broken politics.
Today I want to talk about how we fix our broken politics. Why should people believe that we will fix our broken politics, fixing broken politics? Tomorrow we publish our draft manifesto on fixing broken politics. We've got to fix our broken politics, and we've got to start fixing it right now.
You want to start by fixing that broken record?
Part of his fixing plan would involve making lobbying more transparent and MPs more accountable.
Mainly, though, it would involve ousting Gordon Brown, who the humanoid was understandably keen to finger as the personal embodiment of the entire expenses mess.
He represents the dying days of secrecy and suspicion. We are a new generation at ease with openness and trust.
Yes, the gloves are truly off in the run-up to the election. If only we knew when it was.
We still haven't got a date for the general election.
May the 6th.
But listening to the politicians, you'd think we were already in the thick of it.
No, I think you'll find that's got interesting dialogue in it.
But what are voters concerned about? Well, our political editor, Nick Robinson, is travelling across the UK to find out.
Yes, the BBC's Nick Robinson was so keen to find out what the pleb in the road really thinks about politics, he hit the streets last week to tour marginal constituencies in his funny little car.
It was a bit like an episode of Mr. Bean, really, minus any of the good elements of an episode of Mr. Bean.
The series was called Taking the Pulse, but it should really have been called Lugging the Box, since that's what he spent most of his time doing. He took his special ballot box everywhere, into factories, round curry houses, down pavements. He even let it ride on the roof rack of his car, even though it would clearly fit on the back seat, this show-off. His first port of call was Cardiff, where he eagerly entered a Welsh gym.
Which is something John Barrowman probably did a lot during the filming of Torchwood.
Once inside its warm walls, he asked the Keep Fit fanatics within if they wanted another 5 years of Labour.
Although most of them were sweating like they'd just done 5 years of Labour.
I would despair, I think, of 5 years of Labour.
God, I haven't seen a man sweat like that since, actually I don't want to go into it.
Next he hit the north, to the stereotypical northern town of Pendle, where he shared a bed with some northerners to ask them,
do the Conservatives understand people like you?
I don't think that Conservatives ever understand the working man.
They do if they got the subtitles on.
From the north to the Midlands.
Wake up, Dudley. You could decide who's in power for the next few years.
Morning, Tiggy.
Oh, don't ask her, she'll vote for Eagle Piggle. Anyway, during his tour, Nick asked everyone for their opinions. Men standing too close to the camera, women reflected in his specs, people furiously tugging their bells.
But despite the wide spread of voters, it isn't the most rigorously conducted poll I've ever seen.
You can put a tick or an X or a question mark. There's hardly any secrecy. Some of the voters look like they've been drinking. Some clearly aren't 18. There's wholesale deliberate damage to the ballot papers going on. Children shit into the ballot box. And some of the questions are a philosophical mind f***. Oh, and at the end he just pisses off without even telling you the results.
Mind you, to be fair, it was better than the Afghan election.
Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Good night.